My thoughts on Hitler can be summed up with two words: who cares? No matter how hard the people behind the greatest story never told work themselves, Hitler will always be a being of pure evil to the public, less of a historical figure and more of a barely defined symbol that can be used and abused by everyone from politicians to Hollywood for cheap emotional manipulation and the votes and cash of stupid people. Top secret documents could leak tomorrow, revealing that Hitler was secretly Jesus and had been working on alternative energy to free us from our dependency on fossil fuels, and nobody would give a damn, because what we perceive Hitler as has become far more powerful than what he actually was. Hence my apathy. It's hard to care about a cartoon villain with a shitty mustache and one testicle. I mean, how much media has involved Hitler as the bad guy? I can only watch a man be shot, stabbed, decapitated, tortured, and pissed on so many times before my righteous stiffy of justice starts to deflate, Either hire me a fluffer or move on to some other target to brutalize for my amusement. Christ, 3 paragraphs of Hitler and we've barely started. That never bodes well, does it? But even with my monumental lack of interest towards Hitler, what, you thought I was going to stop at only 3? I'm still going to punch him in the face when I go through the pearly gates and see him playing cards with God and JFK, because that motherfucker officially ruined nationalism for the rest of us. While humans have always been attached to their homeland and the traditions of the past generations of their people, nationalism as an ideology did not begin to mature until around the end of the 18th century, with the American and French revolutions being its debutante, where it was paraded around and had its ass grabbed by all the eligible men looking for a wife, sex slave, maid, next victim, delete where appropriate. Nationalism emerged from the romantic idolization of feeling and identity. God, the romantics were a bunch of pussies. And the liberal requirement that a legitimate state be based not on a dynasty, god, or imperial domination, but instead a people. Both romantic nationalism, in which the state derives its legitimacy as an organic consequence of the unity of those it governs, and civic nationalism, where the state derives legitimacy from the active participation of its citizenry, rose from what were essentially middle-class movements. Though unlike modern movements born from middle-class liberals, nationalism actually accomplished something besides giving thousands of dollars to Sean King. After the Napoleonic Wars ended in 1815, nationalism was driven underground as the major powers of Europe tried to restore the old dynastic system, turning to the ideas of legitimism to regain their comfy thrones. The publication of the Carlsbad Decrees in 1819 by the German Confederation didn't help one bit either. But enough of that, let's get back to our favourite topic. National Socialism is a strange beast, like a hybrid of horse, eagle, rhesus monkey, and a fucking shark. You don't know whether to let it go back into the wild, put it down, or sell it to a freak show for a fortune. National Socialism traced back to the Prussian tradition, which regarded the militant spirit and discipline of the Prussian army, the motherfuckers who pimp-slapped France in 10 months, as the model for all individual and civic life. To this add political romanticism, Nietzsche's Übermensch, some social Darwinism, 2 chopped onions, and a sprinkle of salt before placing in a 200-degree oven for 3 hours. Served with potato salad and a copy of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Really, what do you need to know? It's in the fucking name. National Socialism, the combination of nationalism and socialism. Alright, fine, let's ask Uncle Adolf then. In Mein Kampf, Hitler wrote about his particular vision of National Socialism. For me and all true National Socialists, there is but one doctrine: people and fatherland. What we must fight for is to safeguard the existence and reproduction of our race and our people, the sustenance of our children and the purity of our blood, the freedom and independence of the fatherland. Every thought and every idea, every doctrine and all knowledge must serve this purpose, and everything must be examined from this point of view and used or rejected according to its utility. Then no theory will stiffen into dead doctrine, since it's life alone that all things must serve. While the bit about purity of blood no doubt rose from eyebrows, nobody could really say anything, because Hitler had just made Germany do a fucking 180 right before it ran off a cliff. An impressive feat to say the least, considering the mess Germany was in during that time. But then in the middle of World War II, the Allies uncovered Hitler's daycare facilities for the undesirable, and it all went to shit from there. After tearing each other apart and squandering everything they had won over 450 years of world domination, and watching the United States, the rebellious teenager of Britain, becoming the political, cultural, and military powerhouse of the world alongside Russia, Europe went what I like to call stark raving mad and committed itself to a transnational project to create a united Europe. There were 2 reasons for this. The first was the Cold War and the need for collective defense against those filthy communist scumbags next door. But the deeper reason was the nations of Europe also saw redemption for the barbarism they believed they had helped cause. As George Friedman writes in his 2011 article, The Crisis of Europe and European Nationalism, the deeper problem was nationalism. Not only had Europe failed to unite under a single flag via conquest, but also World War I had shattered major empires, creating a series of smaller states that had been fighting to be free. The argument was that it was nationalism, and not just German nationalism, that had created the 20th century. Europe's task was therefore to overcome nationalism and create a structure in which Europe united and retained unique nations as cultural phenomenon and not political or economic entities. At the same time, by embedding Germany in this process, the German problem would be solved as well. The idea was that free trade regulated by a central bureaucracy would suppress nationalism and create prosperity without abolishing national identity. So as the world pulled itself back together just in time to nuke itself to death, nationalism became the enemy of Europe once more, just as it had been in the post-Napoleon era. Pick up a newspaper, watch a television, check the news updates in one browser while masturbating to German scat porn in the other. Do any of these and you will find pundits, writers, and political figures wringing their hands over a rise of Euroscepticism and the nationalism that is driving it. The dream of the global era is falling apart, and the current climate in the EU is the biggest example of that, with anti-EU nationalist parties such as UKIP, the SNP, and Front National rising in popularity. And I'm all for it. While I may be a filthy Australian, a denizen of a country that nobody cares about and whose greatest achievements are dying on the wrong beach and cold chisel, the idea of handing over core sovereignty to something like the EU just rubs me the wrong way. Call me an idealist, but I always believe that the people that make up a nation are the ones that should control its fate, not some faceless bureaucrats far away. Yes, treaties and alliances influence us, but in the end it is our hands that pull the lever, and whether that lever leads to fortune and glory or wrath and ruin is on our heads. Plus, having pride in your homeland is something that a healthy population needs, or you end up like Germany in its strange obsession with suicide by refugee. While the current crop of talking heads point to the surging tide of nationalistic sentiment as a sign heralding the birth of Hitler 2.0, that fascism is coming and the Great Purge is about to begin, I don't agree with that line of thinking. Like any other ideology, nationalism can be reductive and positive just as it can be Germany during the 40s. Just because you wave a fucking flag and cheer your country on doesn't mean you're one bad day away from cleansing the world of the filthy degenerates. It's also no great secret that the same fucks who sob at the thought of nationalism in Europe enthusiastically endorse it in other regions. Nationalist struggles by East Timorese, West Papuans, and Palestinians, for example, are all looked on with pride. Hell, down here in the Down Under we embrace Aboriginal nationalism even though in the end it's just empty platitudes. I highly doubt the Australian government is just going to hand the whole continent back with an apology note and ship anyone with skin whiter than a seagull to England. Of course, such unpleasant comparisons are sidestepped by using self-determination instead of nationalism. But self-determination is so connected to nationalism that to separate the two would be like trying to separate conjoined twins with a blunt scalpel while blind or drunk. All you're left with is a confusing mess you have to hide before the awkward questions begin. The struggle of self-determination makes no sense if they are not also nationalist struggles. How can a people have sovereignty if they do not also become a nation? You cannot have one without the other. So you know what? Fuck it. When the 26th of January rolls around, I'll wear my Australian flag thongs, put on the green and gold zinc cream, crack open a stubby and listen to Jimmy Barnes's whiskey-fueled screams until I'm deaf, all while reflecting on the fact that Australia is actually pretty damn good. And I suggest that you all do it for whatever national holiday your second-rate countries celebrate as well.